Housing Secretary for not going far enough in supporting residents affected by the cladding crisis. Robert Jenrick's announced another £3.5 billion to pay for the removal of unsafe materials on high-rise buildings. He's starting a loan scheme for those in blocks lower than 18 metres. Well, let's get some more reaction to that now and speak with Paul Afshar, campaigner for the group End Our Cladding Scandal. Morning to you, Paul.
Good morning, Lisa.
And just remind us, because I gather from our conversations before, you're in a low-rise building in East London. So for you then, has the Housing Secretary gone far enough? Is the money enough? How will it help you or not and the people in your group?
Thanks, Lisa. And can I just say thank you to LBC for continuing to cover this important issue. Unfortunately, yesterday's announcement was not good news for people like myself. As you say, I live in a shared ownership flat. I live in a building that's 4 stories high, and I won't get any funding. The Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, stood up in Parliament last week and promised us that no leaseholder, no homeowner would have to pay to have dangerous cladding removed from their home. And yesterday the Housing Minister stood up in Parliament and betrayed that promise. I'm afraid it does feel like a betrayal. I myself am in a situation now where I will be forced to take a loan for longer than my mortgage term in order to remove dangerous cladding that I didn't cause. I didn't ask to be put on, nor should I have to pay for. And having done the calculations following the Housing Minister's statement to the House yesterday, I worked out it's going to take me 66 years in order to pay back a loan for what we expect to be the cost of removing cladding from most flats. So this is around £40,000. So just to put that in context, I'll be 103 by the time I pay off this cladding loan. So I'll be getting a card from the Queen before I've actually unsaddled myself with cladding debt.
Goodness me, that certainly puts it into perspective. And yet, Paul, we heard Robert Jenrick say the changes represent the largest ever government investment in building safety.
Well, I have to say this is the largest ever government failure of regulation. You've got millions and millions of Britons up and down the country who have been suffering from sleepless nights, worrying about the safety of their buildings and the size of the bills that are going to come through their letterboxes to have dangerous cladding removed. And for many of them, for the majority of them, yesterday's announcement doesn't change anything. Don't forget, it's not just people like myself who live in buildings under 18 metres, this sort of arbitrary benchmark that the government has set. It's also people in buildings who live above 18 metres. The Parliament asked the government for £15 billion to solve the cladding crisis for the most high-risk, high-rise buildings. And yesterday, Robert Jenrick gave a fraction of that for the same buildings. And it's not just the removal of cladding, it's payment for waking watches, it's higher service charges, it's fire breaks, it's waking watch patrols, all of which are currently costing right now today hundreds of pounds a month for leaseholders who are living in both high-rise and low-rise buildings as well. And yesterday's announcement had no funding for that. So I'm afraid, whatever the Housing Minister wants to say, the reality on the ground is very different.
Well, it certainly sounds like it. Where then does this scandal, as it is, take you where you are and others now? Are many, for example, still stuck perhaps trying to sell their flats regardless? And also tell us about the effect, and I'm sure it's had a toll on your mental health.
It has. Just to answer your first question, Lisa, I've tried to sell my flat twice in the last 2 months and both sales have fallen through. No mortgage lender would lend to someone who wanted to buy the flat because of the presence of cladding. And that hasn't changed today after the statement either. And I would say that, since I found out about the presence of cladding on my building last year, I've been waking up in the middle of the night worrying about the bills to have removed, and obviously worrying about the safety of my flat. I saved up a lot of money to buy this without any help from my parents, and was that the right decision? I don't know.
We wish you well, Paul. Thanks ever so much for taking us through the issues this morning. Paul Afshar there, campaigner for the group End Our Cladding Scandal.